to The Daily Show.
The Daily Show?
The Daily Show.
The Daily Show.
On Men's Radio.
Men's Radio.
Men's Radio.
Men's Radio.
With Russ Kane.
The 80s are back. Hi, everybody. I'm Russ Kane. What's left of him. This is The Daily Show, exclusive on Men's Radio Station. This is what I look like. This is the face of someone who is just strapped to his desk, chained to his desk day and night, because the book has to be delivered to my agent by the end of this week. And today is Wednesday. Anywho, you know him, you love him. Christmas is just like interfering with me. I know he loves Christmas. It is the elf on a shelf, ladies and gentlemen. Neil Long.
Hello, how are you?
I'm exhausted. How are you, fella? You okay?
Yeah, I'm pretty okay, thank you. How's the book going?
Yesterday, Longy, was a huge day for yours truly because I hit 75,000 words. 75,000 words. I think I hit at 11 o'clock last night. And so I was back at my desk, and I was back there by 8 this morning, like everybody else. And when you got to deliver, you got to deliver. There's no point in moaning about it. It is what I want. It is what I need to do. It's who I am, and I'm very excited. I'm excited how the book's going to turn out. Because I keep changing it in my head. Let's bring on our guest while he is waiting in the digital room. You look very Christmassy, boy. I got to tell you, by the way, that's sweet. You're like a little gnome in your own Christmas card. Just thought I'd mention.
I am.
You may. All right. Hey, should we bring on a professor, a proper grown-up professor?
Yeah, why not? Hello.
Let's do that, ladies and gentlemen. Professor James Kingland. Hello. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon, of course. Professor, maybe not grown up yet. I don't want to grow up properly, but all well. Thank you for
none of us want to grow up.
Exactly.
It's good. And looking at this picture on the screen, it's great to see the Bee Gees have reformed. God. Right. Now, Prof, I got to tell you,
yourself.
We experience. Yeah, you're still with you too. I think you're Larry Mulhern. Now, we experience, me and Neil Long, a huge lag it's the technical issues that we have all the time. So it's not that we're interrupting each other, but just be aware there is a slight lag. So, James, if I may be so bold, tell us all about yourself, why you're here, and what it is you do.
Well, Russ, again, thank you for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
First of all, I'm going to give you a real shock because with these youthful looks, I've done radio for some time with the BBC, and I was always told the good old line, I've got a face for radio. But this face has been 40 years in the NHS.
Are they still in existence, the BBC? Are they still going?
Well, I was on
the BBC
local
still
radio,
going, James?
I thought you were going to say the NHS then.
Sadly, the local radio has been culled quite dramatically. So I was doing a late show on a regular basis.
It's disgraceful.
On Radio Merseyside.
It's disgraceful what they've done. Absolutely shocking. I echo your sentiments. It's absolutely disgraceful. They're meant to be the national broadcaster, and they have decimated local radio. It's a national disgrace.
Well, there's been quite an outcry. I was based with Radio Merseyside. However, I was waxing lyrical about myself, wasn't I? So 40 years in the NHS, although I stepped down from clinical practice a couple of years ago, I've always had a portfolio career, albeit 31 years as a general practitioner. But I think I'm here today because in March 2019, I helped set up a national participatory network called the Digital Clinical Excellence Forum, or DICE for short. And it was connecting the independent online providers of service, this burgeoning area of care now where many people now are choosing to have not necessarily always more convenient, but or more responsive, but a different type of consultation with on an online service. And when I say independent, there's a very large private presence for this, but private in terms of well-known brands, but they're not dealing with an NHS contracts. So we've got lots of organisations, all the well-known high street providers of care who do provide medicines now online. And the Digital Clinical Excellence Forum has tried to network the clinical leadership of these services to produce guidance, not quite standards, because we have standards set by regulators and professional bodies, but to set something that the public can be better served by having a branded or almost a kite mark for services online in the independent sector. So we've just launched our first set of guidelines, and it's the start of a program that hopefully will give the public the confidence and trust in the independent sector, because we do have an awful lot of ability to get online medicines from the unregulated sector and some, I think the technical term are dodgy services, and of great concern to some of the regulators who not only regulate the NHS, they regulate this sector as well.
So if I'm understanding this right, it's basically stopping people being Dr. Google and going online and ordering the drugs they think they need. Have I got that right?
Well, it's not stopping them, because I think when you talk about the regulated sector, people have always gone for unregulated service, but it's akin to if your gas boilers needs fixing, you'd go to somebody who's registered with a brand like Corgi or a British industry standards, and that doesn't exist at the moment. So we're developing that so that not only the Care Quality Commission and the GPHC, the General Pharmaceutical Council, will regulate services for patients. There's this sector that sadly has grown that is unregulated, unregistered, and provides services of questionable quality. So sometimes they are illegal services, and that's something for the law to deal with. So we're not trying to clean up that particular area of care. It's just that for the regulated service, we're giving a standard of care that the public can trust. And just like British industry standards, why would you go to have something fixed in your home, something that you are going to utilize, unless you were confident about the standards that were being set? So this is
you wouldn't. I'm surprised this doesn't exist already. I'm kind of surprised it doesn't.
Well, over time, since about 2012, we started to bring in regulatory. We brought in for the NHS licensing for doctors, then licensing for nurses, which didn't exist when I started in practice. Then we brought in the regulatory functions to ensure the quality and safety of services.
Yeah.
In the main, that's the Care Quality Commission. But the independent sector, i.e. outside of the NHS, although many still supply services within the NHS, didn't have that. They're still regulated. They still have professional standards. So online pharmacy, for example, will still have standards set by the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. But industry themselves hadn't led with best practice guidance. And that's what we're doing at the moment. So it's the sort of the third leg of the stool, where there's standards set by professional bodies, there's standards set by regulators. Now the industry themselves are saying this is best practice in the detail of what we deliver in certain areas of care.
Okay.
And the first one, which we've just launched, is an area which is of high concern in our society, but at the moment, certain treatments aren't available on the NHS. So our first guidance has been around androgenic alopecia, a grand name for male pattern baldness, of which we've got probably 40% of males in the UK suffer with thinning hair or the full male pattern baldness. We see the receding hairline and the crown going thin. And this is specifically for men, but of course 30% of women by the age of 70 can suffer with certain hair loss. But this is an area where
Yes, we wouldn't think about it so much for women, but it does exist, doesn't it?
Well, postmenopausal, some of the
Mm.
same hormonal changes. For men, it's to do with the male hormone testosterone and its conversion into something called DHT,
Right.
dihydrotestosterone, which is the thing that starts to cause hair loss. And 95% of hair loss in men is caused by this process. There's some rarer conditions, like if you've got an underactive thyroid or autoimmune, where you've got antibodies. These are rare conditions for hair loss.
And for those
95.
listening, so there is a way to reverse this process, is there?
Well, there's a treatment, and what we produce guidance for is that the treatment, a tablet called finasteride, sometimes prescribed as Proscar, Propecia, I think is another name. And whilst finasteride is available on the NHS for prostate problems, it's not available for male pattern baldness, and it's in a lower dose. So men, if they want to use this well-regulated and well-researched medicine for stopping and reversing hair loss, you can only get it on a private prescription. And
I
therefore,
like
many
it. I
men,
like this. So you're kind of part watchdog, part safety advisor, and part advocate, I suppose, on the leading edge of showing people what is possible, I suppose. Because I imagine the reason why I'm probing here, I imagine a lot of people listening may not even know that. And certainly not know that there was a body set up to to recommend, to signpost people, which is basically what we do here at MRS. So it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Quite a lot of work, I would imagine, setting up something like this. Not a small task.
yes, we want to go to areas of major concern. That there's been some concern. So finasteride, well used in the NHS and well used in hair loss, and has great compliance and good results. But if it's not managed properly, for example, if a man has a depressive illness, and of course, when you're losing hair, it often causes concern. Sometimes your self-image can be changed, and you can get a bit down. But if you've got depressive illness and you use this tablet in an unregulated environment, there are certain dangers, and indeed, there are some episodes of suicide being investigated at the moment related to the use of this tablet. So you've got male pattern baldness, you're concerned about it, you go online to an unregulated service, you get this tablet, which actually makes you more depressed to a point of having suicidal ideation. They're the sort of incredible rare occurrences, but why we need this properly dispensed through a service that's well regulated and licensed to do
Absolutely.
it.
I mean, absolutely. What other areas of major concern are there? Where else are you looking at?
Well, we're looking at the areas that are available in the independent sector on private prescription, but not necessarily in the NHS. Now, there's one transition. The next area we're looking at is injectables for obesity, which is just now being available. These injectables were mainly for people with diabetes. We know they work for obesity. There is some sense of starting to use it in the NHS, but it is much more freely available. When I say freely available, in the regulated sector by the by online services. So we're looking at areas of care which is of great concern to the general populace, but not always available on the NHS. However, many people are contacting the sector that is coordinated by the digital clinical.
Why would the injectables for obesity, and I can take a guess here, not be available on the NHS? Is it because that would be seen as frivolous or a lifestyle choice, possibly?
No, sometimes when medicines are produced, there's a complex area before they are fully licensed. There's many years from the production by the pharma industry to having a license. The license then has to go through formal review by the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, the NICE, before the NHS often adopts it. Then there's always the financial aspects, as well as the impact of the treatment in areas of care. So it's taken a long time to get to the point whereby, even though it was available for the management of obesity and diabetes, and for diabetes management, it's only now being thought of as an independent treatment for obesity, whether you've got, independent of whether you've got diabetes. It's NICE approved, but it's been available on private prescription in the independent sector for some time. It's just moving into.
I wonder how many other examples of this there are about drugs that are already established for one thing, but could be a perfect solution for something else, but isn't as well known.
Oh, the history of medicine is, not to say littered,
Replete,
but
I would have thought.
where a drug has been produced for a particular reason and then found to have another effect. One of the commonest ones, when I was a junior doctor, the main treatment of depressive illness were called tricyclic antidepressants.
Yes, I remember hearing about those, yeah.
Amitriptyline now is far more utilized for pain relief than it is for depressive illness, because it was found that it would alter perception of pain. And as a treatment for pain, in addition to your analgesics, the nature of medicines as they were first licensed have changed because of the experience.
Now this is interesting. Alter perception of pain. What do you mean by that?
Yes, there's because pain is sometimes subjective, so the same stimulus can affect people in different ways. So pain management is a complex area of care, which we often go to analgesics, but sometimes there's anti-epileptics or drugs that were developed for epilepsy that are now used for pain management. Affect pain thresholds, affect perceptions, affect pain transmission. So it helps analgesics, everything from paracetamol to morphine.
Yeah, it's a two-shot approach.
But there's a history of where treatment, so finasteride, has been used for many years for benign prostatic hypertrophy, which all men will be getting because of old father time. But it was only one utilized, found that it would stimulate regrowth of hair. So in a lower dose now, it is utilized for hair loss, but it wasn't licensed and isn't available on the NHS in this lower dose. Hence why we find possibly up to 100,000 men per year are consulting online to see if they are eligible or should be prescribed finasteride, this 1 milligram tablet for hair loss. But it's done under the now industry standards that have been set by the industry, regulated by the GPHC or CQC, and gives confidence to the public that they're getting something that is safe, effective, and well monitored, as opposed
which
to
is important all around, of course. Because I think it's good to have faith in the NHS. I always did growing up. Very much so, and it's good to know that these things are in place that we can continue that.
Well, the NHS in itself is a brand that gives you confidence, and we're just saying for the independent sector is DICE a brand that gives the public confidence they're going to a safe, effective, and well-regulated service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Professor, you wouldn't know that I apologize, it's just shocking technical nonsense is today. Now, Professor Kingsley, you wouldn't know that I was called in by the Department of Health to look after basically the communications for what was it was called the Commercial Directorate. And I was called in to do a 3-week project and stayed for 52 weeks creating their websites for all the primary care trusts, etc. And then doing all the communications. It was a huge job and quite fascinating, probably the most fascinating thing I've ever done. And I was stunned at the wastage of the NHS in our first year of operation at the Commercial Directorate, which was disbanded. What a surprise. We saved £400 million in the first year, and it would have done so much more. And it was completely tarnished by the media. So I'm very interested in when private can work in conjunction and segue tongue and groove with the NHS. How do you feel about that?
Oh, Russ, that's a great question, because it opens up at least another couple of hours. A couple of hours conversation, because I went to be an advisor at the Department of Health. I had a year's contract and I got out after 4 years. and some of it was looking at these sorts of issues. I've always been of an opinion, it doesn't matter who gets you better, as long as it's safe, it's got evidence, and it's well researched. You know, if somebody, as a GP, if somebody came into me and said, "I've just got this new treatment from let's take it to the extreme, the local witch doctor, and I feel so much better," is that okay? Say, well, you've given me the answer. You're feeling so much better.
You feel better.
That's not a great example, but so the independent sector. I mean, we're talking about big industry here who are providing a service that isn't available on the NHS. We talk about the NHS free at the point of need, not based on your ability to pay. But there's always been charges in the NHS, prescription charges. Go to your hospital, you'll have to pay the parking fee. If you have a road traffic accident, believe it or not, there are fees that ambulances, if it's an RTA that you've had, or insurance claim. So there's always been fees in the NHS. And of course, not everything is available on the NHS. We're talking about androgenic alopecia. So a man who wants this treatment has got to go at the moment. It's not available. You can get a private prescription for it, but you're better to go to the independent sector where they've got a lot of
what you're doing include what would be so-called, I think I touched on this earlier, cosmetic-y type things. It's an area you're going to be getting into or not?
Probably not so much because the cosmesis covers a whole range. But of course, in my junior days at the Royal Liverpool Hospital, we had people coming in for surgical treatment for cosmetic purposes. It was only in the 1980s that cosmetic treatment was excluded from funding in the NHS. So we certainly remove certain treatments or things that haven't got a strong evidence base. So you can't get everything you want on the NHS. You get most things free at the point of need. So there's always been a reason for the independent sector. The other thing that is that the public's top concern about the NHS has always been and always will be waiting and access.
Yes, waiting
I've never heard anyone saying, Dr. Kingsland or Professor Kingsland, what are your qualifications? They're just saying, sometimes in my time, I say, bloody hell, Kingsland, it's like, I probably could see the Pope quicker than I can see you. You know, I've had to wait 2 weeks to come and see you or whatever. So it's waiting and access. And we've known that where waiting and access takes a long time, then what happens is people choose to go privately. Last year, 1 in 8 people went for private service, often a service that's provided by an NHS consultant who also works in the private sector. So we've always had a complementary private sector. You know, a little bit unfair because of about waiting and access. We want equity and access for all. People who can pay or pay private insurance can go privately. So we've always had a range of services that people access. The NHS being the vast majority and the most important, and hopefully it will stay as a state funded. But going back to Russ's question, I've no problem about having service from other sectors as long as it is got quality standards, it's safe, it's regulated, and people will always use that anyway and always have. But
it's fascinating. It's fascinating, Professor Kingsland, how the British media, because when we were in the office on a Friday, you could set your watch to it at 4 o'clock. The Telegraph or the Sunday Times, usually them, would phone and try and I would never answer the phone because I thought I am not going to sit here for the next 3 hours on a Friday when I want to be off somewhere trying to fight a fire with this. They were very condemnatory, but the savings were enormous. And I've never had a problem with these two notions of the NHS, which we can't afford and haven't been able to afford since 1951, which is a fact, and the private working in parallel, as long as you say, it is safe, it is proven, and it is properly structured. In other words, we don't want cowboys coming in there. It's an extraordinary thing how they were so, it's being sold off bit by bit, especially to the Americans, who seem to be, for these newspapers, seem to be the bête noire of these situations. And it wasn't being sold off. It was offering the patient at the point of service a choice. That's what it was. I'm talking about walk-in clinics, which was seen as something terrible at the time. I've never had a problem with it. You know, offering a walk-in clinic, great, because the waiting lists are terrible and the waiting lists are getting worse. We, as perhaps Claudia may have told you or not, Claudia Collingwood, focus here on Men's Radio Station about mental health and well-being. And so the waiting list to go and see a practitioner to assist in mental health have got, well, they're unacceptable. You know, it was 6 weeks, which is okay. Then it stretched to 6 months. Sometimes we're hearing reports of it's 18 months. Well, that might as well be 18 years. It's not, you know, if you're in a mental health crisis, 18 weeks ain't going to cut it. 12 weeks ain't going to cut it. This is the problems.
Or longer.
We find it. Or indeed, as Neil says, or indeed longer. I don't know how, you know, you're a very experienced man. How could those waiting lists, I know that's not why you're here, but you are here and you've got an OBE and you're a professor, so screw it. How can these times be brought down to something more manageable? Is there any answer at all? Because I don't know what it is.
Well, if I had the answer, I'd probably be in a different position. But I think that one of the answers, I often talk about allocative value. What I mean by that is where we've got a cash limited resource in the NHS. It's huge. This year we're spending something like 160 billion of taxpayers' money in the NHS, but the demand is still outstripping the supply. But also, we won't have time to go into the wastage. There is all my time at the Department of Health and Aid and Work. 20 to 30% of current utilisation might be duplication of service, wastage. There's an awful lot of efficiency gains we can have, but the allocative value may be that we are still focusing efforts in what we think the public's top concern is, long waiting lists for scheduled care.
Yeah.
But the real problems of what's affecting society, mental health being a huge one, which has been accelerated by COVID, and we're seeing the fallout now of all sorts of consequences of what happened during COVID that wasn't directly related to the virus, but due to economic injury, bereavement, delayed services, social isolation, has led to increasing mental health problems, which we just can't supply against. So if we can't just put more tax into the service, because you go out into the public and you say to 100 people, do you want to put more money in health? And 100 people say yes. And you say to the same 100 people, do you want to pay more tax? And they go, no. And that's the way the system's funded. We're always going to have the difficulty of maybe not having enough resource. So should we use the resource in different ways, which might mean that certain schedule things, going back to the plastic surgery, which was cosmetic surgery, removed from NHS treatment, do we say that certain things aren't available, but we'll have more resource for mental health services? However, you may not be able to get certain orthopedic procedures, routine, which are still important, but you might have to socially insure against certain things that aren't life-saving. The NHS will always be there for emergency care and heart disease and cancers, etc. But there may be some things we say, well, we can't fund that anymore because we're going to put more money into mental health services. So the allocative value may need to shift. If we can't increase tax, we can't increase spending. Efficiency is a really big issue for the NHS, but no one solved that one as yet. So no easy answer, but I think it's the allocations that we're making and the focus at the moment. The NHS, probably up to March, all it will be is urgent and emergency care. We've got the winter coming, which is a surprising thing, isn't it? I've never heard that one before. Winter's coming.
No, it's odd because it's almost like there's going to be leaves on the line causing train delays. Which would be strange because we've never had that, or indeed understood that leaves in autumn fall off trees.
Or the wrong kind of
like
winter.
It happens every year.
Yeah, but we may see the independent sector.
Can I ask you a leading question? Because when we get somebody of your caliber on the show, I kind of like to dig deep if we can. But don't feel, we're not the BBC. If you don't want to answer it, absolutely not a problem at all. We can chat about anything you like. When I was at the Department of Health for a year, I had to do a lot of research. And the NHS was started with the best of intentions. We'd just come through a horrendous war. The country was on its knees. And as a way of, I guess, saying thank you and showing gratitude, and Aaron Bevan created the NHS, I think, in 1949, which was a wonderful thing. But my research showed that this was all official documents, by the way. It wasn't like Mail Online or something. It was a serious delve into the NHS government archives. That by 1951, within 2 years, they'd realized they'd made, with respect, a terrible financial mistake. Couldn't afford it. Horrible to realize, but they simply couldn't afford it. But it was then enshrined in the DNA of the United Kingdom. And to take it away would have been, well, a huge vote loser, to put it mildly. How did we square the circle, a man of your great experience, when we know it's unaffordable, but we desperately need it? We need it more and more. There's nothing we can do. It's an absolute, to me, an insoluble situation.
Well, there's been some talk for a while, not privatising, but how much the NHS can supply, as I was saying before. And there has been discussions, even my time at the Department of Health, about is there some sort of co-payment system, social insurance that be brought in, means testing, because of course our social care system is means tested. It's not free at the point of need for all. So is there some sort of payment system that needs to be brought in, or things that will be always enshrined as immediately accessible, free at the point of need, but others that might have to have some charges? I don't know. It's been a discussion, and some discussions that have been going for a long time. The question is, the NHS has been going over 75 years. Is it going to survive another 75 years? Well, we won't be here to discuss that. But I don't think you can say the NHS will be here forevermore. It's been evolving. It's every single new political party that comes into government does two things with the NHS. They say, number one, we're going to reform it and we're going to invest in it. Well, just recently they've said we're going to reform it, but we're not going to invest in it. But we go under this continual reform, and the difficulty is the reforms often just restructure, and we end up with the same problem as we're in now, really struggling for meeting all the costs of the NHS, increasing waiting times, and difficulty with access, whether it be in your general practice, your hospital. But I think that there is going to be some serious discussions over the coming years, which the political party gets into government in a year's time, about the affordability of the NHS and the extent to which we can have free at the point of need, not based on anybody's ability to pay. For the politicians, it's a case of that will never be a discussion, but the reality is, if we're not going to increase tax quite dramatically, or shift services, money around the public service as we've been doing, or incredibly increase efficiency, then there's, unless there's somebody, if you've got any seeds for a money tree, then please let me know. Otherwise, it's going to be.
I mean, if I did have a money tree, though, is throwing money at it necessarily the answer? Maybe not.
No, I think that looking at productivity and efficiency in a way that we've not done before, looking at the most important needs of a changing society and funding that, as Russ was saying, mental health would be top. As a general practitioner, he said, what is 40% to 50% of all people seeing GPs have got significant psychological aspects to their presentation. So if that's 40 to 50%, you'd start to say, well, let's resource services to meet that need, as opposed to resourcing things that are perceived that we should be resourcing. Russ and Neil, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to. I've got to.
You've got to go. You've go, Professor Kingsland. It's been an honour. Seriously, it's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute honour. Thank you so much.
If I may just say before going again, I think Claudia will give me some earache if I don't just mention about the Digital Clinical Excellence Forum again, and for chaps who are
Go on.
who are looking to have treatment for their male pattern baldness or have concerns, please look out for the Digital Clinical Excellence Forum mark, and for that regulated sector that is supplying that service. You can have the confidence, particularly with the guidance published yesterday, that the confidence that you're getting a safe, effective service from that network. But thank you very much for having me on today, and I'd be delighted to come back because some of the discussions are fascinating.
Well, thank you for being on. A happy Christmas to you,
and to you too, and to the listeners too. And very happy to come back if I've not bored.
That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic, Professor Kingsland. Thank you so much. Bye bye. You know what's interesting, Longy, and I apologize for the lag. There's nothing we can do. We keep as much as we can, and MRS political free. It's not a political statement. There's enough stations out there. You can have politics coming out the gazoo 24 hours a day. But the papers always go about it's Tory privatization. And I think, just for clarity, I think all parties are just terrible. I mean, they're just ghastly. This country is screwed. But they always go, and Labour particularly bang on about the Tory cuts and the terrible privatization of the NHS. When I was working for the Department of Health, it was under Tony Blair's government, right? Labour, if you recall, or Labour light, yes, as it became.
Even though an anagram of Tony Blair MP is "I'm Tory Plan B," but
precise. No, you won't. The guy. I'm not even going to get into my views on him and what he did and the wars we got into. Jeez. Anyway, I saw, because I was there at a senior level, bizarrely, but I saw all the Labour Party privatisation plans. All of them. I still have them under lock and key, by the way. They are draconian. If you think what you get to see in the Daily Mail when it's jumping up and down is bad, you should have seen the actual way that the Labour Party and the health ministers, etc., back then knew was the only way to try and save the NHS. Those plans were draconian of the first order. So it always makes me laugh, which is why I don't watch the news, because I can't stand it, when I see the fantastic hypocrisy coming out of the mouths of these people. When I've seen, I saw it all. And I was writing the briefing notes for parliamentary select committees, and my chain of command went from me to my boss to the Minister of Health to number 10. That was it. There was only 4 steps. So trust me, I saw a lot of stuff. I've never disclosed it, but I'm just fascinated by the fabulous hypocrisy that we...
Here's a thought, and this isn't a political thought.
No,
this is not... It's difficult to say this because without sounding like I'm criticising the NHS or people in it, and I'm doing neither, and I really mean that. Most people in the NHS are committed, and
I think they're magnificent. They're magnificent.
Yeah. So this is not against the people or anyone in it. It's just the whole theory behind it, and perhaps this is advanced thinking, or maybe I'm just a little crazy. I don't know, but it's more of a sickness management service than a health service. There is a difference between fixing problems when people get sick and teaching people not to have those problems in the first place.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Give an example. Yeah, you could prescribe all the metformin in the world, or you could teach people a diet to eat that would not lead to diabetes, for example.
I mean, Longy, can I posit this to you? Let me posit this to you. They go on about, you're 5 a day. They go on and on and on about 5 a day, and you should do this and you should do that. And then they get idiots like me to come and build all these fabulous websites where you can get all your advice, blah, 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 blah. What is every advert on TV? Fast food. If it's not gambling or bingo or some stuff, clearing up my language,
Right.
it's fast food.
Now, of course, there's no incentive in that for the big drug companies. Of course, if if metformin wasn't needed anymore, they're not going to like that. So there's a lot of people with dogs in the race, shall we say? But wouldn't it make sense, as psychology discovered, to find out what works and teach people that, rather than trying to rehash of the past and fix what doesn't work?
Absolutely. I think some things need to be said. And they don't get said on other channels, but I'm going to say them. And it's my view. It's not the view of my business partners necessarily and my co-directors. Let's be clear. Number one, if you sit in an NHS waiting room at a GP surgery, the level of rudeness to the receptionists is unacceptable. Just unacceptable. It is jaw-dropping. They treat the receptionists like they're garbage. That's number one. It's not acceptable. Number two, not turning up for appointments. What a waste of time, literally, and that equates to so much money. If you don't turn up for an appointment, there should be a consequence to that. And the only consequence is a financial consequence. But the bureaucracy which would be required to monitor that is enormous. I don't know, one of the thoughts, Phil, Dave, and I have talked about this a lot. What do you think about this? Everybody has to put in on the credit card 20 quid, right? It's held. And already I can hear you going, Cheez. And if you don't turn up for an appointment, you get fined. £25 comes off. Let's say £5. I don't know. I can't think. That's the only way I can think of it. You can't issue fines.
But I mean, for years, I mean, as I said, I really believe maybe too much in doctors. But I remember in the Patch Adams the Patch Adams book, he said, "I'm a doctor, not a deity." In other words, I don't hold the power of life and death as such. And what he meant by that was,
because they do.
Well, yes and no.
Neil, don't they?
Well,
don't they?
Let me put some more meat on the bone of that, because I realise that's a bit of a contentious point. Yes, in some cases they do. What I mean by that is, though, a lot of people, including me for many years, have the attitude, well, it doesn't matter if I get sick, NHS can easily fix me. All right? It's not that easy. And it took a component of responsibility and self-care out on my part. If I don't want to get lung cancer, I shouldn't smoke, rather than thinking, so the NHS will fix me, right? And that was my attitude for a long time. And that was the point Patch Adams was making. That's what I meant by that.
It's a two-way, everything.
Yes, it's a two-way thing. We've created a dependency.
It's a two-way street.
We talk about dependency quite a lot on this show, in a mental sense, in the mental health sense, but it's also physical. We've become very dependent on pill for every ill, on doctors' opinions, and elevating doctors to heights where they probably don't want to be on. You know what I mean? Doctors, they're not deities.
They're doing a job. They're doing a job. They're doing a job. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of very lazy people in this country. There's a lot of lazy people all over the world. There's a lot of lazy people in this country who don't care, who just expect everybody to sort everything out for them and provide and offer nothing, put nothing back in. Is everything with life is a two-way street. You got to look. I mean, I'm watching you vape like crazy and seeing plumes of smoke going everywhere, and I'm thinking, well, and we're talking about health. Well, that ain't too good. But the thing is, it's your choice. You've got to take you do have to take responsibility for yourself. That's what life's about.
Yes, and I justify vaping that it's 80% better than smoking.
You don't have to justify it to me at all. It's your life. I have absolutely no skin in the game, and I'm not being critical. You don't have to justify it.
But
to
if
me.
I
You
were to
don't
say
have
to the
justify
doctors, I've vaped
you don't
too
have to
much,
justify it to the
fix me,
viewers.
it may not be as easy as I think it would be. And no decent doctor would tell you that. Doctor would advise you to stop and then give you ways of doing so. But
It's
again,
hard.
you're right. I
It's
would need
tough.
to take some
But Neil,
responsibility in that.
you know, you are the first person. I've learned a lot from you in your area of expertise. Stop beating yourself up. Quitting smoking is very, very hard. It takes an absolute will of iron. You've got to say, you know, the thing. My dad got a very rare form of throat cancer. It's called pemphigus. Pemphigus. The only other person I know who had it was the lead guitarist from Blondie, who was then Debbie Harry's partner. He had pemphigus. Chris Stein, I think his name was. And he went there and they said, well, you got to stop smoking. And he said, well, I can start easing. And they said, no, you've got to stop smoking now. And you know what? He just stopped. Boom. That day. Never touched another cigarette. That was it. Now, pot was at least a 20 a day, man. Possibly more, plus all the cigars. And he just stopped on the spot. And I thought, that was my thing about life. You know, if you want to do it, you can do it. But you've got to want to do it. And I was stunned he could do that because he was a huge gambler. I mean, he had a big gambling habit, my father. And he never ever stopped gambling. That was the only time I saw him really happy, when he was gambling on the horses. I'll be perfectly honest about it. And I'm sure there's part of my DNA, Neil, that if I opened up to who I was and what's lurking inside, geez, I'd be down at the bookies all the time. But I won't do it. I won't do it. I don't need that in my life. And isn't it interesting? Let me throw this out at you, Longy. I always say I don't gamble, right? And yet everything I do is the most enormous gamble. I never do anything that's safe. And it took me until about this year to suddenly think, of course, I'm not betting on the horses. I don't go to casinos, but every part of my life.
Maybe you're more like.
I'm horribly. I'm horribly like him. You know,
I wouldn't use the word horribly. I'm just saying maybe you're alike.
Well, you know, it's hard to fight. It's very hard to fight. What is your, it gets onto the whole question of what is your true nature? How much do we hide our true nature and put a nice veneer because we don't want to upset other people, or you won't be accepted, or whatever it is. But every business venture that I do, men's radio station, women's radio station, prime examples, huge gambles. No safety net. Doing a one-man show and hiring theatres all over the world. Huge gamble. No safety net. No one else to blame. Writing a book. No one else to blame. Just me. If it goes well, if it goes wrong. So they're all gambles, aren't they? All of it.
Well, an interesting way of looking at this from a psychological point of view is we say to ourselves, if I might not be accepted if I open up to my true nature. But every part of us, or every version of us, if you see them as having a good intention, okay, then they are easier to accept. And then also these aspects of us are more easy for us to embrace and communicate with, and perhaps evolve the intention slightly. For example, my friend felt very bad about himself and he drank. Nearly drank himself to death. He's fine. He's okay now, just about. But the intention behind what he was doing was good. It was a good intention. He wanted to feel better. Nothing wrong with that intention. It's just the way he went about it. But if he'd have gone around all day going, no, I don't have that intention. No, I can't look at that part of me. Do you see what I mean? Then it would stay in the dark and not be able to come up to the light to be resolved or evolved, if you like. And an evolved way would be, is there another way I can get this need met to feel better without creating another problem with alcohol? Do you see what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. You've mentioned it before, and I thought it was an excellent example. something else I'd like to bounce off you, and it occurred to me only this morning. I had some messages from a very, very dear friend of mine who this year lost both his mother and father, and
gosh.
they were elder. They were elderly, but nonetheless, even as an adult, you suddenly think, "Shit, I'm an orphan," and it's a weird feeling. I had that feeling, and you think, well, wait a minute, I'm a grown up. You can't call me an orphan. You know, I'm not Oliver Twist or something. But you are an orphan. You've lost your parents. My pal, who's out of the country at the moment working, and he wrote and he said, I'm feeling very odd. I'm feeling very odd because it's coming up to Christmas and I'm thinking about my mother and everything. And I thought, I'm not going to say who it is. And I wrote back this morning quite a long thing saying, you know, in true Neil Long style, be kind to yourself. It's not irrational. These big anniversaries like Christmas, like New Year's Eve and all these things are brutal. Brutal. And I said, if it makes you feel, I said, you're not being weak by feeling bad because it's Christmas and you're spending your first Christmas without your parents. And this is a grown-up man. They were elderly people. They weren't in their 50s or 60s or anything. They were much older. You know, for example, New Year's Eve. I hate New Year's Eve. Why do I hate New Year's Eve? Because my late wife's birthday was New Year's Eve. We always tried to do something kind of nice. And I hate it. You know, she's been gone next year. It'll be 20 years. I can't believe it. It feels like 20 minutes. We've been gone 20 years. Yeah, I know. Where's the time gone? Well, mostly down the toilet. But it's okay to not feel okay. I hate that. Sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's true. You know, you look at it, you process it, and you think, yes, this is why I'm feeling lousy, and I'm okay and allowed to feel lousy. It's all right.
Allowed, yes. You've used the word
we're
allowed for the simple reason that if you fight against any feeling that you feel, number one, you'll push it back further into the dark. I love my last conversation, what I said a minute ago. And number two, it lasts longer. And also, if you block out that, you will also block out the good stuff, which equally wants to get in, because the good stuff is available in present moment as well. So it's just
explain that.
Grateful for the good and graceful with the bad, if you like.
Say that again slowly, because it sounded good, but I'm not sure I'm getting it. Go on.
I say grateful for the good, graceful for the bad. Just allow it all to be there. It's what makes us complete human beings. If you try and push out a bit of yourself, you push one thing away, you push all things away, you push out all the good that's available. You won't see the good that's available. Yeah, that's a very bad thing, but it's equally true that there are still good things in life. There's always a counterbalance. There's always a yes, but it's equally true that. Yes, I'm terribly grieving at the moment, but it's equally true. There's a bright future waiting for me. And if you allow those both to be there, rather than just exclusively focusing on the one, or worse, trying to push the one you don't want away, that will just increase it. What you resist persists, right?
You've used a phrase, I think, in the past. Sit with it, process it. It's okay. I think when you try and shove it away, that's when the problems start.
Well, it takes an awful lot of effort to keep something down. You know, the purpose of feelings is they want to be felt. They're messengers. But once you've got the message of them, they don't need to come up anymore. But the more you push them away, they're gonna be like, well, no, I've got a message to deliver. I can't go away until you've signed for this message, as it were. Will you sign for the message? No. And that can go on for years or days or months or whatever. But the minute you go, oh, that's what you're trying to tell me, message delivered, thank you. It served its purpose. That's why it doesn't work to fight it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I was hitting myself over the head with a hammer, it might be a good idea to stop doing that. The message is hitting yourself with to make a very obvious example, hitting myself on the head with a hammer hurts. That's the message. The message is stop doing that. And I'll be like, no, I've got to keep doing this. I don't know what this is trying to tell me. Do you see what I mean? And when you put it that way, it seems silly, but that really is all feelings are.
Well, I don't know if I'd say all feelings are silly, but they are feelings, and you have to kind of, and it's okay to just
No, I
sit
said
with
when
them.
you put it that way, it seems silly.
Oh no,
But
it
all
doesn't.
I'm
No, but
saying,
it doesn't really. No, I think it's a very no. I disagree with you. I think you're right because I think it's a good analogy because some things are so dumb that we do to each other. You might as well say, "Well, I'm going to get a hammer from the tool shed or wherever, and just keep beating myself, or just bang my head against the wall." Why are you doing that? Oh, well, that's what I've always done. Well, stop doing it. Well, I don't know how. Well, just don't. Just don't.
Doctor, it
We got
really hurts
5
when I
minutes
touch
left.
myself.
What we got? I'm going to ask you a difficult question. We got
Doctor, it
five
hurts when I
minutes.
touch myself there. Well, stop touching
Yeah,
yourself there then.
yeah. So stop touching yourself. When did I got 5 minutes and I want a shortish answer from you, Neil Long?
I'll try.
The Neil Long that I knew at Capital Radio is so different from the Neil Long that I'm delighted to work along this week. I was really thrilled when you came on board.
Thank
And
you.
you're a different guy. You're a completely different bloke. We're all different because we're much older. But you seem to have had a complete seismic shift in that you're very thoughtful, you're very spiritual. What was your road to Damascus moment?
I always, even at my time at Capital, been thinking about the bigger things, the bigger answers. Is there a bigger picture? And the more I looked, the more contorted, unpleasant, fear-based bullshit I found. Then I found some very good books, which I've mentioned on here before. And that kind of calmed down an awful lot of fear-based thinking. I will say it does come up from time to time, but it is less regular, less intense, and less long. It's a slow, it's a gaining of wisdom, I suppose. It's a slow process, and I don't have all the answers, but it's good to know there's always answers to find, because if you have a question, you will get an answer. But I wouldn't say it's a road to Damascus moment particularly. It wasn't like bells and whistles.
Okay, it wasn't a light bulb moment.
Really.
All right, it wasn't a light bulb moment.
No, not particularly. Not one any particular light bulb moment. Say, oh my God, my life's never going to be the same again. It's much more kind of slow and kind of everyday, and sometimes it's really simple. Just slow down, enjoy life more, appreciate more. Just something silly like that. Oh, story to tell you about gratitude. This is a really good one because there's science behind it. There's a lovely book called The Gratitude Jar, and it's available on Kindle. And I'm just going to find out who the author is, because I think we should give her a shout out because it's absolutely lovely.
Okay, The Gratitude
And the
Jar.
author is, let me just have a look. I'll find it in a moment. There it is. There she is. Josie Robinson. And she was a mum without much money, had a family, kid, and struggled with mental health a bit, struggled with drinking an awful lot, and then kind of hit the rock bottom. I can't do this anymore. Found a mentor, a spiritually minded lady. And I don't want to conjure up this image of tie and dye and mystic nonsense, very down to earth. And this lady said, keep a jar and just put 5 things that you're grateful for in the jar every day. And she did it with her son. And over a period of about 30 days, she started feeling better and better and better and better, because she was putting her focus on what she had and what she appreciated rather than what she felt she lacked. That changed her feelings. When the feeling and what you give your attention to increases, it's a psychological law. So it's a virtuous circle. The more you see to be grateful for, the more there is to be grateful for, more and more and more and more. Conversely, the more you focus on what you hate and what you don't like, you seem to get more and more and more of that. Anyone notice that? Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Then she hit a roadblock. Then her son's little 4-year-old, and it's a lovely story about a mother-son relationship. What are you grateful for? Well, mummy, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. It's a lovely, cute story as well. But then she hit a roadblock. It really helped her out. She stopped drinking by reading the Alan Carr Easy Way to Stop Drinking, but she needed more money, and she thought, well, it can't work for that. It can't work for that. And there was huge work problems, being placed in all different places around town, hardly been paid at all, hours cut to 2 a week. It was dire. But she rewired her brain with gratitude on money, started to feel better about it first. That's the key. This is where we go wrong. I'll feel better when it happens. No, feel better first, and then it will happen. And then her perfect job fell into place without any effort whatsoever. And there is science to back this up as well. So the book is called The Gratitude Jar. I'll hold a picture up. And, you know, worst case scenario, it could be that bloke on Men's Radio being a bit fanciful. Best case scenario, it could change your whole life.
The Gratitude Jar. How lovely. I love ending on an up note and an upbeat feeling. Neil Long, we love you. We'll see you Monday.
Thank you. I'm
I'll
grateful
be back
to
on
you.
Friday
I'm grateful for everyone tuning in, and I'm grateful for this day. Have a great day. Take care.
And you. Take care, everybody.